Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 25th of February 2021. In this video, we'll be looking at this couple of issues. The structural fragility of Union territories. In this particular article, we'll be talking about how our constitution envisaged Union territories, what is the nature of the political structure that is arranged in various Union territories, and what are the problems associated with the functioning of those political structures. After 1956, when the State Reorganization Act came into existence, various union territories have been created for a variety of reasons. For example, if you take the case of Delhi or Chandigarh, it was mostly political and administrative consideration. Similarly, when we are talking about Puducherry or even the case of Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Dayu, all this have a peculiar culture because of the influence of foreigners in these geographical entities. So, because of the fact that they cannot mingle with the rest of the population with which they have a geographical continuity, the cultural aspect has been taken into consideration and they have been given the status of union territories. Similarly, if we take the case of islands, strategic importance is the reason to have made them union territories, because we have to understand the fact that whenever a particular geographical entity is designated as a union territory, center has a significant role, or it is directly administered by the center through home ministry. That is the reason, for strategic reasons, islands like Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep have been given the status of union territories. And also to take special care and treatment of the backward and tribal people in the northeastern states is also taken into consideration, and eventually after a lot of hesitation they have been given statehood. So you have to understand the fact that statehood is a recognition of the aspirations of a people in a particular geography. But there are certain union territories like Delhi and Puducherry which have significant population, yet they cannot be given a status of a statehood. For those kinds of union territories, and also the latest addition to this is the Jammu and Kashmir, erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir. All the states are now union territories with a legislature. The reason why legislature was given is because democracy should be available if the population is large enough to make a difference. So the administration of union territories was laid down in the constitution in article 239 to article 241 in what is known as the part 7 of the constitution. So this is the background. Also, we have to understand that Delhi and Puducherry have a different set of administration, because in most of the union territories it is directly governed by an administrator appointed by the central government. In the case of Delhi and Puducherry, and also in the case of Jammu and Kashmir after the 2019 Reorganization Act, they indeed have a lieutenant governor or an administrator as per the nomenclature laid down in the particular act. They have a directly elected legislature, but at the same time there is also the lieutenant governor or an administrator who presides over these people, and he is considered to be an agent of the central government. So there is a constant tussle between the administrator or the lieutenant governor and the elected government, and this is even more so if the ruling party at the center is different from the government that is formed after election in these union territories. You can see this in the case of Delhi and Puducherry. So how to deal with this friction is the central point of this article, and to give a brief context of what happened in the Puducherry Legislative Assembly, let me explain. A news broke out that the lieutenant governor or the administrator of Puducherry, Kiran Bedi, has been removed from the post of administrator because of the friction with the elected government. So, right after that, after a few days, the resignations of MLAs from the Puducherry Assembly led to the fall of the government there. If you remember, we have discussed even in the year 2019, the same thing happened in Karnataka Assembly also. So, in this particular case, resignation from the membership of the House is to be recognized as a member's right. But at the same time, if you take a look at our constitution, that is Article 190, it says that nobody should be forced to resign or there should not be any threat. Rather, to put it very simply, it should be voluntary and genuine. And if the speaker knows that there is something wrong with the way in which a particular member has submitted his resignation, he or she is not obliged to accept that resignation. But if you take a look at the pattern of resignations of members of Legislative Assembly across the states over the past few years, you notice a pattern. Such resignations have invariably led to the fall of the government. Now, if the lieutenant governor or the administrator is indeed so powerful, let us understand the logic behind or the purpose behind providing these legislatures to the union territories. Like we have discussed, the purpose was to understand that the people of that particular geography have certain democratic aspirations, and the arrangement of Article 239 is not able to meet the democratic aspirations of the particular geographical entities that we're talking about, in this case Puducherry or Delhi. So the creation of a legislature and the Council of Ministers did seem logical because it enforces the policy of the constitution, that is promoting democracy. And when we are talking about democracy, it involves both procedures as well as values. When we're talking about procedures, it should be giving a fair chance to every stakeholder involved in every democratic decision taken. And when we're talking about values, it is what is given in the preamble of the constitution, the fundamental rights and the directive principles of state policy. Or in short, whatever is given in the constitution can be termed as democratic values. Now, in this context, we have to understand, looking at the trend exhibited by various legislative assemblies over the past few years, what is the structural flaw in the design of the legislatures in union territories? What is that flaw? We have discussed that certain union territories were given legislatures. And what is the constitutional provision that guaranteed this? Article 239A, which was inserted in the year 1962 to enable the parliament to create union territories with legislatures. Now, it is absolutely meaningless if a legislature does not have council of ministers to take the decision, because that is the real spirit of democracy. And at the same time, if you take a look at the structure of Rajya Sabha, Article 80 ensures that people can be nominated to Rajya Sabha by the president provided they belong to certain categories like arts, literature, sports, etc. So the nomination aspect is not just unique to the Rajya Sabha, the same provision applies to even the union territories as well, the legislative of union territories. So what you have to understand here is, in the case of Puducherry, the central government has nominated 3 members who belong to the ruling party at the center. The problem is, this was contested by the state government or the union territory government, in this case the Puducherry government, that they have not been consulted and they have been unilaterally appointed in the assembly. So the state government has challenged this in the Supreme Court. In the particular case that we're talking about, called the Lakshmi Narayan versus Union of India case, the court held that union government is not obliged to consult state government because there is no such provision. Whereas in the case of Rajya Sabha, there is a certain qualification that these particular categories of people, or people from those particular categories like arts, literature, social services, sports, etc., should only be nominated. Such Lack of categorization in the case of Article 239 has led to arbitrary appointment of three people in the Puducherry legislative. So this has been a point of contention. This shows that there is inherently a structural flaw. Now, what is the role of administrator in this entire game? If you take a look at the structure given by the Constitution, the administrator has a complete right to disagree with the Council of Ministers and reserve that to the President. But how can a President take a decision? According to the Constitution, again, he should refer to the Union Council of Ministers. So, what this essentially means is Union Council of Ministers has a direct say on the Council of Ministers in legislatives of UT. So, this is the second structural flaw. On one hand, we are allowing democracy at union territory level. We are giving them a legislature with Council of Ministers to take decisions, and yet, when scenarios like this happen, it is the union government, or rather the party at the will be the actual decision maker. So this is the second structural flaw in the design of our union territories according to the view of the author. So taking a cue from the various experiences we have had in Delhi, it is all the more important to realize the fact that union territories having legislatures will not function under a central administrator. So as far as the aspirations of the people of these regions are considered, it is important to give the legislatures certain level of autonomy in writing. There should be clearly laid down principles regarding the power structures in union territories to ensure that these sort of problems don't repeat in the future. So that is the gist of this article. This article titled Federalism and India's Human Capital is regarding how states should be empowered to carry out the activity of building the human capital. Now, the context of this article is the recent Human Capital Index that was published by the World Bank, and in this particular index, India ranked at 116th. So, despite the fact that there are a lot of significant developments with respect to our economics in the past few decades, the fact that India is still 116th when it comes to human capital is a cause of worry. Now, when we're talking about human capital, let us try to understand and delineate this concept of human capital. What does it exactly mean? In its simplest terms, human capital is that which empowers human beings to realize their potential, and that human potential is collectively called as human capital that can be used as a factor of production for economic growth and therefore the development of the nation. So, to simplify, human capital is everything that ensures that we collectively work towards our economic growth and redistribute it to the entire country so that everyone develops in an inclusive manner. Now, what constitutes this human capital is the big question. In its simplest term, if you take a look at our GS2 syllabus, there is something called social sector, and in that, we'll be broadly talking about health, education, skills, which together comprises human capital. Because if you just take a look at human beings from the perspective of factors of production, now we're talking about GS3 economy. In that, whenever we're talking about factors of production, land, labor, capital is considered to be the requirement to carry out any economic activity. Now, capital is of three kinds: financial capital, social capital, and the next thing is human capital. What is the difference between human capital and social capital? Social capital talks about the level of trust in an economy, whereas human capital talks about the ability and health of the workforce. So, in this context, we will be focusing on the role of states in ensuring health, education, and skills are imparted to the entire population. Now, why is this a very significant aspect? If you take a look at the governance, State governments have a majority of responsibility to carry out activities with respect to health, education, or even skill building. But how is the fund allocation for this? That is the point of contention, and this article tries to explain that. How does the state government get its finance? Before GST, there were various avenues for state, but after GST, they were subsumed under the state GST or SGST. But we also know that GST is a destination tax. That is, the states which have large number of consumers will end up getting more GST. Having said that, we also have an increased allocation through the 14th Finance Commission, that is 42% is being devolved to the states. Apart from this, the other avenue is the central sector schemes, that is the schemes which have a division of 60 and 40%, 60 by the center and 40% by the states. The point of contention is this: we are talking about subjects which are sometimes completely under the ambit of the state government. For example, health. Now, why is that a central sector scheme, the fund allocation is just 60% by the center, when it is the mandate of the state government to ensure health, because health is a state subject? So that is the first point of contention. Secondly, in the backdrop of the fall in revenues for states after GST, it is all the more important to give more and more amount of funds for capacity building. If you take a look at the 15th Finance Commission, there are certain amount of funds which are linked to performance. The problem with this is certain states already have a head start. They are in a position to leverage these funds much quicker than the rest of the governments. In that context, is there a parity between states which have a head start and states that are already backward? That question is not answered. So the efficacy of performance based incentives is being questioned. So the author in this particular case say that certain amount of funds should be unconditional. That is, no conditions should be put on the state governments, and it is up to the state governments to decide how they spend these funds in different schemes. We cannot really enforce the schemes of the center to say that they are beneficial for the people of their state, because different geographies have different requirements, and it is not a welcome sign to impose these kind of one size fits all kind of schemes for every geography according to the view of the author. The third level of government are the local governments. These governments have a problem of collecting funds that are required for their functioning. So the funds for local governments majorly come from states, but ideally it should be the local government collecting taxes. So taxation and tax collection is a big problem, and increasing the tax base is the next level of problem for those local bodies which already have certain amount of tax base. Say for example, cities like Mumbai. So in this context, how do we ensure that they perform better? Again, the answer for this question was the 15th Finance Commission has ensured that it is again linked to performance. The same logic of how to deal with those states or places which do not have a head start is questioned again. But according to me, this is not a big justification, given the fact that we are only talking about policy reforms. Say for example, 15th Finance Commission has said that state finance commission should be constituted by 2024, and if the terms of the state finance commission are not implemented at local level, the states will no longer be eligible to get funds after 2024. This is a very straightforward measure, but the author feels otherwise. This is just my personal opinion. But the takeaway from this article is the fact that the central government should not be imposing any conditions as far as the central sector schemes are considered. States have different priorities based on their geographical conditions and social conditions. So they must be given certain autonomy, and this is the real meaning of federalism. So, according to the view of the author, the entire responsibility of deciding how to spend the funds should be placed in the hands of states. So, that will be the true meaning of federalism, and also they will become active partners in our country's development. That is the gist of this article.